The Rg.Plugins.Popup library has been a fundamental library in the Xamarin.Forms ecosystem to build pop-ups which look and act the same all across different platforms by just using Xamarin.Forms elements. Let's go check out how to build it into your own apps. Here we're looking at the end result, which is not very impressive because it's just one button. But if we press that button, we can show the pop-up. And this, if you won't believe it, this is a stack layout with a background color and just a close button. And we've given it a little width and height. Now, this by itself is not very impressive. But if you think that this is Xamarin.Forms elements and you can just lay out it like any Xamarin.Forms page with all the elements that are there, then you can build like really great pop-ups if you are a better designer than me, and that's not a really hard thing to do. So we're going to see how to show this pop-up. What are your means of navigation? How do you actually do something whenever you click this background? And did you subscribe to my channel yet? All things that we're going to see in this video. Now, before I'm going to show you how to implement this pop-up into your own application, let's have a quick look first at the GitHub repository right here. So this is created by a person that goes by the nickname of Rotor Games. You can see it here in the top left. His real name is Kirill from Russia. So Kirill, thank you so much for putting this together and putting it out there for the community to use and all your effort that you're putting into this, because it is really a great plugin. So thank you for all of that. And I think inspired by his nickname, Rotor Games RG, I think that's kind of the same thing. Rg.Plugins.Popup, that is the thing that we're talking about in this video. Now, the reason for showing you this GitHub repository is that there is a couple of very good documentation pages that I want to point you to, which has a lot of information on how to get started yourself. So I try to keep my videos short and concise, so I'm not going to be able to put everything in this video as much as I'd wanted to, but if you have anything that you want to see more in depth, please let me know down in the comments, of course, as always, and I'll be sure to follow up with something there. Here you can find all the code. There's also a folder samples. So I think there's an app with a lot of samples in there as well that you can, maybe cheat a little bit and look at how they're doing it. So you can just copy and paste some concepts from there, which is really nice. And then if we scroll down, we will see a description of what's in here. So already there's here something. You must initialize this plugin. That's something that we're about to see. Where you can get it on NuGet. We'll see that in a little bit as well. Here is a screenshot on 3 different platforms. I actually don't know what the left one is here. Maybe that's Android as well. But this is Android, iOS, and Android again. But here you can see the things that you can create with this. So this kind of follows more the pattern of the community toolkit pop-ups, the Xamarin Community Toolkit pop-ups. I have a video on that as well. And not so much the ACR pop-ups, no, ACR user dialogs, that's the right name, which I got a video on as well. Near the end of the video, I'll go into a little bit when to choose which pop-up. But they just have a different approach, because the ACR user dialogues shows like the native kind of dialog boxes, and this has a fully customizable pop-up which lets you create it with Xamarin.Forms components, basically. So that is kind of like the main difference. But choose whatever you like. And the supported platforms, that is crazy. Android, iOS, UWP, Tizen, WPF, and macOS. So this kind of mirrors all the supported platforms in Xamarin.Forms today. That's amazing. So in here, this is kind of the important bit. Documentation. You can find all descriptions of getting started, how to use, troubleshooting, and then the wiki. So the 2 things that I want to point out here is the getting started and the how to use. So let's start with the getting started. I will go over this in a little bit, but just for iOS. So for Android, find out the bits for yourself. But you have to do a little bit of initialization. So in your app delegate, we have to go and add this little init line right here. For Android, kind of like the same thing, but now in your main activity.cs. For UWP, you need to do something as well. macOS, Tizen, same thing. But here is for Android, this is a big note, the Android back button. If you want the back button to also properly work with these pop-ups, then you have to do this little on back pressed override in your main activity, so that the on back pressed event will be passed along to the pop-ups, and it will catch that event and it will respond accordingly, basically. So here there is some more information about that, and you can do something or you can do something else. So this is kind of the important bit for the initialization. I will show it for iOS, but you have to figure out the rest for the back button. If you can't figure it out, let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to follow up with that comment. And the other thing is, this is the getting started, and this is kind of like the how to use it. So this shows us the pop-up page. Again, I'm going to go over this at least in a very basic example, but you can see that this has a lot of properties and events and all kinds of things. So on the pop-up page, which is a page that you have to create to actually show the pop-up, it has an event for when the background is clicked. You can do stuff with animations. Do you actually want to close? So that's kind of like the light dismiss, close whenever the background is clicked. System padding, which is interesting as well. I think that is what's explained here. So do you want to take into account the system padding, yes or no? Or, do you want to just push the pop-up over the full screen, the actual full screen, which is maybe not the right thing to do from a user perspective, but I'll leave that up to you. And here you have an implementation example. You can see it has some animations. It can do a stack layout. Let's just actually see all of this in action. Let's just switch over to Visual Studio and see how to implement this for your app. So now I've switched over to Visual Studio for Mac 2019. You can see it here on the left, a file new Xamarin.Forms application is running. On the right, on iOS 15, Xcode 13, all the latest and greatest. In fact, it's so late and great that the hot reload is not working. So we have a fix for it already. I hope it is out by the time that you're seeing this, but don't be afraid whenever I make some changes in XAML and you don't see it showing up. It's all part of the show. But actually, before I do anything here, let me install these great plugin first. So let's go over to our Solution Explorer, and I'm going to right click on the solution, and I'm going to do Manage NuGet Packages. I'm going to search for Rg.Plugins.Popup. And here it is, 5 million downloads almost, which is really a great achievement. And I think it has been around for a long time, so that is really great. So you have to add this package and you have to install this on all 3 of your projects. So let me do this right now, click OK, so that it's doing that while I'm talking here. And we need to do that because, it has a part implemented on the shared project, but also a part implemented on the platform project. That is also why we need to do the initialization on iOS and Android and all the platforms that you might have in here. Here it will open a README for each time it installs. So for the project, it will guide you to the project site and also to the wiki and the get started links that I just talked about. So don't worry if you don't have the links handy, it will come up whenever you install the packages. Here we go. The packages are done installing. So let's go over to that initialization code. So let's go to our solution first, our iOS project, and go to the app delegate. And what you want to do then, I don't think it really matters if you do it before or after the Xamarin.Forms init, but let's do it before. That was how it was in the documentation. So here we can say Rg.Plugins.Popup.init. There we go. So just add that line in here. I think it's exactly the same for Android, but be sure to check out the documentation. I'll make sure to, whenever I put this code on the sample repository, you can find the link in the video description that it will work for Android as well. So I will make sure of that, but I'm not going to show you all of that in this video. I'm just going to show you this for iOS. So with that init line in here, that's all we need to do to prepare this plugin for use. So now let's go over to our main page.xaml. We're going to update our little title right here, Rg.Plugins.Popup sample. And I'm going to remove all the labels right here and just going to add one button, actually one button with a text of show pop-up, just to show you how to get started with all of this. Let's add a clicked handler, generate a new one, and let's go over to our main page. Well, actually, let's not go over to our main page code behind. Let's go over to create a new pop-up page, because we just need to create a new XAML page, or if you like to do it in code, that's of course possible as well. Just create a new file with a specific Rg.Plugins.Popup pop-up page. So let's do that right now. Let's go over to our solution. Right click on our shared project this time, and I'm going to add a new file, and in the forms category here I'm going to choose a forms content page, and I'm going to name this my pop-up page. new, and it should present us with a new page right here. We land in the code one, but we can also go to the XAML one. So let's do that first. And what you need to do here is actually, I'm just going to type it here so that the IntelliSense can fix it for us. Pages, and then we're going to say pop-up page. And let's fix this bottom one here. For some reason, Visual Studio doesn't do that for me. And whenever we do, we can see the little light bulb coming up here. And we can say that it wants to add this XML namespace with the URL rotor game. So this is kind of like a shorthand notation for another way of writing the full namespace to this pop-up page. Let's format this a little bit nicely. And I'm going to remove this content right here. Now, whenever we do this, we also need to make sure that we update the code behind file for this. So let's go over to our mypopuppage.xaml.cs. And we should change this content page to be a Rg.Plugins.Popup.Pages.Popup page. So now it's all the same. It will give me red squigglies. I think it's because this code is still running. So actually, let me just stop running it right now, so we can see that this might be going away and that it knows that this is actually the same pop-up page. And you can see here that we can start using the properties that we saw on the documentation page just a little moment ago. So you can say background clicked, but it also has the background clicked command. So you can also use this with your MVVM scenarios, which is really, really nice. And we can also say like close when background is clicked. Let's just save that for in a minute. We're going to see that as well. What I'm going to do first is here in this pop-up page as content, you can just add anything that you would normally add in regular pages of Xamarin.Forms. So we can just add this stack layout here, and let's center it in the middle. So let's say horizontal option center. Let's make this vertical option center. Let's give this a little background color of white so that we can see where it is. And let's add a button in here so we can actually close the pop-up as well. So close, and add a clicked handler to it that we are generating. So now we have a little, very little pop-up page to work with, right? So this should show us a little white box with a button as a pop-up. So before I implement the close button, let's go over to our main page, actually our main page code behind. So let's go over to our Solution Explorer, main page, XAML.cs. We still have our button clicked handler. And here is where we're gonna show our pop-up. Now, this is going to be interesting because a pop-up is not something that is known in Xamarin.Forms. Well, it is by multiple ways right now, but this one isn't. So there is two ways to do this. Again, check the documentation because the recommended way is different than what I'm going to show you here. Well, actually, let me show you the recommended one as well. So we have Rg.Plugins.Popup, and we have services.Popup navigation, and this has an instance. So this is kind of like a static instance of their own navigation service that's in here. And you can access all these kinds of events with popped or popping. You can access the pop-up stack, and you can push async. So you can push async a new pop-up page in here whenever something is pushed or pushing. You can remove a page. So all kinds of things that you can do here. But what they also did is create a extension on the regular Xamarin.Forms navigation. So that is really nice as well. This one is more recommended in your MVVM scenarios because this is implemented as an interface. So you can use this also with dependency injection, which is great whenever you want to use this from your view models and whatnot. But if you're just going to use this from a code behind, so what I'm going to do for this sample right now is then you can just go to navigation, which is the default Xamarin.Forms navigation implementation. And we can say push pop-up. Now you see that it doesn't recommend me that with IntelliSense because we need to add this as actually, we need to do push async. Here we go, async. And then it will recommend us to do using Rg.Plugins.Popup extensions because this is implemented as an extension method. So they created a couple of extension methods on our navigation object from Xamarin.Forms that will allow us to work with pop-ups as well. So that will make it really easy. And now I can just say new my pop-up page And by default, it's animated. Like we've seen, you can do a lot of stuff with animations, but you can disable it just as well. Why isn't this happy yet? Because it doesn't think that this is a pop-up page from the Rg plugins. I'm very much sure it is, so I'm going to ignore this for now and see whenever we run this. Actually, let us run this and see if this actually works. And I think then the squigglies will go away, it rebuilds, and it will figure out that my pages are correctly. So our app should be coming back up right now. And whenever I click the button, we should now see our pop-up coming up. So let's try that, show pop-up. And here is our very, very tiny pop-up. It is just the size of our close button, but we have a pop-up. And if I close on the background, and the background is pretty big by now, you can see it closes as well, and we didn't implement the close button yet, so that doesn't really work. But now we've created our first pop-up. Now let's see what more we can do. So let's go back to our pop-up page XAML, and let me enable that background clicked. Well, background click might be nice. Let's do something new here, and also implement the background. So close when background is clicked. Let's set that to false to see what we're actually doing. And then let's implement that button clicked for our close button. Well, before we do that, let me make this pop up a little bit bigger, because this just sizes by the elements that you put on it. So if we take this stack layout and we say width request, and we make that 200, and we make the height request, and we make that, I don't know, let's make it square 200 as well, then we should see a little bit bigger pop-up by now as well. So you know, it looks really nice with like the transparent background and the backdrop. Maybe you can customize that as well. If that's something that you want to know, please let me know down in the comments. And you can also, I think we saw in like the screenshot from way before when we started the video, you can have this little close button on one of the corners, because that's all stuff that you can do with the layouts here and rounded corners on your pop-up. So you can really design this any way you like, and it will work then cross-platform across all the platforms that are supported. So that's really great. Okay, so let's go to our mypopuppage.xaml.cs, and we got a couple of things now. So the button click, this is again same thing with the navigation. We can say now, I guess, pop up, okay, pop up async. This is a funny name like this. Let's see if IntelliSense thinks that's correct. Yes, using Rg.Plugins.Popup.Extensions. That's another extension method. So we can just pop it like this. And on the background click, what are we going to do there? Let's just do display alert just to see that that's actually working. And let's say, what are we going to type first? Is the message? It's the title. Okay, stop. Did you subscribe yet? Okay, maybe you want to subscribe to my channel. This is your sign to do it right now. Click that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. So whenever you click on the background, it will show a little pop-up box right now. And that might not seem very useful to display an alert, but you can, whenever you have maybe some entry form in this pop-up and someone clicks outside of it or taps outside of it, you might want to notify them like, hey, you have entered data. Are you sure you really want to close this? Yes or no? And then you can actually close it with the pop-up async. So that's all scenarios that you can create with this. Now let's do show pop-up. It's much bigger by now, you can see that. So we have a bigger pop-up. We can just do that by setting the size, and it will follow all the kind of like visual restraints that are also in Xamarin.Forms element. We can do the close, and it closes right here. You can see, maybe it doesn't translate well on this recording, but you can see that it animates nicely as well. And whenever we click now outside, it doesn't actually hide, but it will show us this dialog with, did you subscribe yet? So if you haven't done so 1 minute ago, then now is the time to do so. So it doesn't close whenever we click on that background, but we can trigger actions whenever we do click on that background. So that is very nice to have as well. And this is kind of like the basic usage of how to get started with Rg.Plugins.Popup. Now, as we've seen in the beginning, there is much more to discover here. So I've already repeated it a couple of times. So please let me know in the comments if there is some specific thing that you'd like to see here, or maybe some advanced scenarios, and I'll be sure to look into that as well. I also promised you at the beginning that I would talk a little bit about when to choose what pop-up plugin. That's a lot of P's. But, you know, because there is roughly a couple of choices, just use the built-in forms ones. Use the Xamarin Community Toolkit pop-ups, which is pretty similar to this. I think the Rg plugins has some more features by now, but you know, the concept is pretty much the same, or ACR user dialogues, right? So that's kind of like the three choices. And I think the choice between the Xamarin Community Toolkit and this RG plugins and the ACR user dialogues is kind of clear, because the ACR user dialogues are just the native implementations of the dialogues. It's not even really pop-ups, right? It's all about semantics here, but it's really just showing native dialogues mostly. So that will translate into how an alert box should look on iOS and Android. And it's just very simple, like the thing I just did with display alert, but then with a lot more options. So it's really a great thing, but it does conceptual a little bit different than the other plugins that I mentioned. So when to choose the Xamarin Community Toolkit or when to choose the Rg.Plugins.Popup, that's basically up to you. Which API do you like more? Which library has the features that you're actually looking for? So, you know, just try them out both, do a little spike in your development process, and find out which one works better for you. That's kind of the way. And, you know, the Xamarin Community Toolkit is backed by Microsoft. It will get support for .NET MAUI in the near future. So, you know, for the RG plugins, I hope it will definitely get support for .NET MAUI as well. That would be really awesome, because this is an amazing product. But who knows? So, you know, that's all considerations that you could take into account when choosing a library. Thank you so much for watching. Again, one of my videos, please click that like button if you've actually liked this video, so it will be shared to other people as well and they can enjoy this little video of mine. Please click that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, if you like what you see. And then next time, also, if you click that little bell, it will be brought to you, this content, instead of you having to go out and look for it. So subscribe to my channel and it will just be there. And for the rest, I'll be seeing you for my next video. Keep coding.